Welcome to the DesignDash Podcast, your guide to designing a life you love. Join us as we explore the keys to living the life you want without compromise. We're going to start today, as we always do, by thanking our wonderful friends at Monogram Appliances. If you don't know about Monogram Appliances, you should definitely check them out. They have an absolutely wonderful team. Their materials are top-notch. The products are absolutely high quality. And they just have a great community, great relationships with designers and with homeowners, and a great relationship with us. We've been working with them for a few years at Laura U Design Collective and now with DesignDash, and we're so happy to have them sponsor the podcast.
And today we are discussing our guests that we've had this quarter, the first quarter of 2024. So our first official quarterly wrap up, right, Melissa? So we're going to talk about the great guests that we've chatted with throughout this quarter. These are our inaugural guests. So the first 4 people that trusted us to open up on the DesignDash podcast. And so we're going to talk about all the highs from our conversations with them. There were no lows. So yeah, all the good stuff. So Melissa, I'd love to ask you first, was there one standout for you amongst the guests and they're all wonderful. Like, don't get me wrong. That's not what I'm asking. But what was a big standout for you? What was a surprise maybe that came out of these initial conversations?
Yeah. I mean, I think that there were a few surprises, but one thing that really stood out to me was Mulaney's podcast. And I think a lot of it was because it just touched me for where I am right now. Going into my 40s, she had talked a lot about reinvention and adaptability, and not even because she had felt like there was a challenge there, but because she was just pushed to do something more. And I've been talking to a lot of my friends who are the same age, and we feel like we're kind of in the same place. Like, we're happy with where we are, but we're just like, okay, what's next? Like, I'm done having kids. I'm pretty settled in my career, but I want to do something else, and I want to do something that's big. And so I really liked the fact that Mulaney, she didn't have to do this at all, but she went back to school. And it wasn't an easy job getting accepted back into a university, but she persevered, found something she really liked and enjoyed, and now she's making a completely different kind of art. And so I just thought that was a really great way to talk about creativity too, because I think we often focus so much on the end product of creativity, the piece or the home when we talk about design. But for me, a lot of being a creative person is finding something new and innovative in maybe the mundane, or, taking an already out there idea and putting a new spin on it. And she's never stopped doing that. And so I found that really inspiring.
And I feel like there's a couple things you just said that were maybe a common thread or a through line for all of our guests. And one of those things is reinvention. And our guests were, 30s, 40s, 50s. But it doesn't matter how old you are. I think you can always reinvent, how old or how young you are. You can reinvent from where you are. So the biggest reinvention to me that stood out, I mean, Mulaney's also the lifelong learning is so inspiring. But the biggest reinvention, I think, for me was Elaine Turner when we chatted with her. And she talked about, she started in fashion. Then she had family commitments that pulled her away from that, I guess, at the time. And she pivoted and also went on to do something that she was really passionate about, which is lifting up other women. And she launched her e-course, which was Know Your Worth, which I took myself when she first launched it. And it's really incredible. So what was your big takeaway from Elaine?
I think what I really liked the most about Elaine was her vulnerability and her capability to just fail, I think, and to be okay with certain failures, or to recognize in herself that she had wanted to do something really big. And then when that didn't happen, that it was still okay, that she was still who she was. and she could learn something from that. I think that sometimes, and I mean, I'm trying not to be this, and I'm not really a perfectionist, but I hate it when things go wrong. And I think that in her podcast, she talked a lot about like, hey, things are going to go wrong, and they have for me, and there's no plan for it. But like, she was able to emerge from that an even stronger person. And now she's using that knowledge and expertise to motivate other people who may be going through something similar.
You know, it's interesting that you said that too, because I was having a conversation with another friend this week who's also a business owner, and just saying like, I feel like I need a kick in the pants right now. Like something had gone really wrong for her in her business, and she struggled with it for weeks. And then a couple of days ago, she texted and she's just like, hey, I'm actually really excited because that forced me to do XYZ. And I'm thinking, God, I need a kick in the ass right now. And I feel like each of these guests, maybe they didn't get a kick in the ass, but there was something that went wrong, some sort of failure, quote unquote failure that they learned from and that they pushed through and either, just stayed with something and came out stronger, or completely pivoted and did something differently. And I think that's what really was inspiring for me, talking to every single person. And also like what failure looks like to each of them and how they reacted to it. So I don't know if this is a failure, but one of the big aha things that came out of the talks with the various guests for me was talking to Anna Van Delden, who owns LHTX, which is the high intensity Pilates studio in Houston. And it was that she had an injury, a pretty big injury. And as a health, wellness, fitness professional, she felt a lot of shame around having an injury. And that never occurred to me that someone would feel that way, that they may feel less than because they were hurt. What did you think about that conversation? Like, I don't know why that just really stayed with you.
I found that so interesting because she has to rely not only on, her business savvy and her mind, but on her body too. And so I think that she has to be a role model to all of these other guests that she's having at her studio. And when you get hurt, you just feel like a failure. And it's also hard too when you're getting a little bit older and you start to realize that your limitations are greater than what they were, 10 years ago, especially like when you're just going out for a run and waking up in the morning, you're now a little bit stiff and there's nothing you can do about it. Like that's just age. I mean, of course,
I refuse to accept this.
But that's the privilege of getting older, right? Is that you get to experience things in a different way than what you had done before. But I found it really interesting that with all of the women that we've spoken to, and then of course with myself, a lot of times the first emotion that we feel when there's just a tinge of failure is shame. Like we feel bad about it, that we weren't able to live up to expectations. And I think that's because we really do put a lot of expectations and pressures upon ourselves as women to have it all and be the best. And when we're not, even in the smallest sense, like it's just everything around us comes crashing down. I will say that the cool thing about Anna, again, and maybe this is just the benefit of getting outside of your comfort zone, was that now she's using those challenges and creating a new business out of it. She's helping other people who are now going through those challenges, and she was able to just really pull herself up out of that.
Yeah. And so I think that's a trend too, or a through line, that each of these guests, each of these entrepreneurs and creatives used failure as a catalyst for something different. And for me, that's really inspiring. And I think sometimes that's what you need. As much as I have such a huge fear of failure personally, because I don't want to let other people down. Like you said, like it's letting other people down. I don't feel like I would let myself down just because I'm like, I pride myself on being pretty gritty. Like I can step back up and do something different, but it's like, it's disappointing the other people in my life that scare me the most. And I think that every single one of these women really did play it in their favor and use that as a springboard to do something better or bigger, or even just pivot. A lot of them talked about community and how important it is for them to give back to their different communities. And going back to Mulaney, that's huge for her. And I think that really opened my eyes also, because I asked her, early on in the conversation, did she, was she always an activist? Was it her art that led to that? Like how did that come about? And she said it just is very intrinsic to who she is, and that was never something separate. I found that really interesting. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think that she's probably just an incredible person. Maybe that's where that really comes from.
She's just deep down amazing.
She's just, but she's also creating her own communities too, with Badge, and then of course, the Obsidian House that we helped minimally with promoting. I think that what she's building there is so important to shine a light on these creators who I think that sometimes kind of fly underneath the radar and don't get the love that they should. So I think she's doing something really important. And I mean, she's just so driven. Like, I don't know if I've really met people who just have this kind of, you just mentioned it, this intrinsic drive where I don't know if maybe she fears failure. I have no idea, but I think that maybe she views failure in a different way than she just sees, little roadblock that I got to get around and something else that I need to solve. So I don't know. I think she's doing amazing things. I think people are going to start seeing her everywhere just because of what she's doing.
I agree. And I love that you said like she fears failure. I don't know. I'd put words in her mouth, but I think she would fear more like not making an impact. I think that's her bigger fear. I think she really wants to make an impact and really bring to light these issues that are truly in her heart and important to her. And like you said, she's an impressive person. Like, she's so passionate, and she is not faking it. Like, she is living and breathing all of her values. And I came away with that like, wow, I need to do more. I need to do more.
I would say she's a very authentic person. So she's very aware of herself and what she needs and what she's good at. And I think that for myself, like going through my 30s and now getting ready to leave my 30s, you kind of feel like you're still finding yourself a lot through that. And so I'm hoping that I can feel that kind of genuine passion and insight, because now I feel a little bit more comfortable in who I am. But then of course, the reason why she's getting there is because she's getting out of her comfort zone. So it's like, I don't know. I just really admire her for the person that she is. But everybody that we've spoken to has been the same way. And there is this authenticity and this genuine demeanor about them that I think has just been so admirable. And that's why they've been so wonderful to talk to.
And I think another thing that really drew me, and it sounds like you're paying a lot of attention to this too, Melissa, leaving your 30s and going in your 40s and the finding yourself, is all of our guests had really amazing self-awareness. Mm-hmm. And I think Elaine touched on this quite a bit, like the self-acceptance and knowing your worth and having that self-awareness that I feel like shows up in midlife. I mean, at least for me, that's when it showed up. And that's when I'm like, screw everybody else. Like, I know who I am. I'm good now. And I didn't have that same, not as much imposter syndrome as I had when I was in my early 20s. Whatever, 20s and early 30s even, until you really figure out who you are. And I think that the women we've interviewed this quarter, they know who they are. They're still curious. They're still learning. Like, that never stops. But I think they're all on this path of discovery and really open to, like Elaine said, doing deep work into who each of them are. I need to know more about that deep work. She talked a lot about her retreat, which is really cool. Yeah. I need to go to this because I could do some work for sure. But you just went, I don't know if it was a retreat, but like a festival. And I know this is completely off topic, but you are very, like, you look like you've gotten some good sun and you look glowy. So tell me about your retreat. Let's talk about that. I
do feel very rejuvenated. So my husband and I went to a big music festival over the weekend, and I think that one of the great things that you can really take away from it, and we haven't gone to a music festival in a really long time, probably since 2018, 2019. But one of the great things about it is all of the people there are so kind and so friendly and so willing to help. I think a little bit of it is because we don't have any responsibilities at the festival. It's mainly just like, can we get to the stage on time? And that's about it. No kids, no work. But to just be around a like-minded community of people who are there and they're kind and they're taking care of you and they're considerate. When I came back home, I was taking that with me, that we are belonging to this great big community. And another thing is too, we got to watch the eclipse together. And so to experience this almost once in a lifetime celestial event with other people in the path of totality, which we were able to experience it. I think that we were able to experience totality for about 4 minutes.
Oh, wow.
With other people was pretty life-changing. And so I think that, yes, a festival community is a little bit different maybe than Elaine's community, but I think that it just speaks to the importance of being with people and understanding their needs and your needs and how they all interact.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we've learned that too with our mastermind, even with our Dasher Network mastermind, is like being with other people and having people that have similar experiences or even very different experiences, but learning from each other. That's been huge too. So one person we haven't really touched on yet is Jackie Fisher. And the reason I want to talk about Jackie is not only is she a client of Laura U Design Collective, I've known her for years. We've done projects together all over the world because she is amazing and loves to travel and loves real estate. And so we share a lot of that love of interiors. So, but what I want to talk about with Jackie is that she really believes in integrating her life and her work. And I have been of that same mindset for a really long time. And I know you're of a different mindset. And so I really have believed for a really long time that there's no difference between my personal life and my professional life, because as a professional, I'm creative. I'm building my business to work for me, not to work for my business. I want it to work for my lifestyle. And I think Jackie feels the same way. So I'd like to hear from you on that, Melissa. And then I'm also going to talk about a little bit, maybe I'm changing my mind. I don't know. So what do you think about the intertwining of work and life?
I just can't do it because I find myself getting really anxious and not focused. Like if I try to really, like when I'm with my family and we're eating dinner, if my mind is wandering and I'm thinking about work, or I'm thinking like, ooh, can I get inspired in some way by this fantastic meal? Then I feel like I'm not completely devoted to what I'm doing at hand. And again, to go back to the festival situation, I think that that's what's so great is that your focus is so singular. Like there's nothing there to distract me. I'm not taking some of those things back and having them impact my work in any way. I mean, definitely my soul and I think my experience, and it was one of the best experiences of my life. But I really do detach that from work.
Yeah.
I think that's okay.
No, I get it. So for you, it's about being present.
Yes. Being present, being mindful. I've realized over time, I'm not a great multitasker. Yes, I can do a bunch of things at once, but I'm doing them kind of halfway. And then I'm finding that I am not fully engaged in the things that I should be doing, especially if I'm talking to, but if I'm talking to my spouse, like I should be fully engaged. Like we only have so much time here. Right. So why am I doing multiple things at once? Like they're just not as important, I guess.
Man, I feel like my mind is breaking over this whole concept of separating life and work. Just for my whole life, I've really entwined them. And I'm always thinking about, how can I apply this situation to my creativity or this next project or an article we're going to write or a conversation we're going to have with a guest or anything like that. Like, this artist is beautiful. I'm in this great gallery. I could show that to this client and they would love it. Yeah. So it's really hard for me to separate, but I'm finding the benefit since we've started this conversation. I am finding the benefit of doing that and of being present. Like when I travel, I would use that downtime when I'm not in the studio or I'm not in front of my computer. I would use that downtime to be inspired, and I would keep a notebook next to me and like make copious notes about how can I work on X, Y, and Z instead of just being there in the moment, in the place. So I think my mind and personality is breaking right now. I have to tell you.
Well, I am married to a psychologist. So when I talk to him about those kinds of things and, listening to other psychologists, they'll say that it's aversion, right? Like if you're trying to focus on all of these other things and you're not fully present, it's because you're avoiding the emotional impact that this thing that you're supposed to be focusing on can potentially have on you. And so when he explained it to me in that way, I was like, oh, so my workaholism is really me just avoiding what I'm feeling at the moment and avoiding challenge and avoiding feeling uncomfortable because I can control work. So that's why I'm doing it. And there are some other psychologists that I've been reading that feel the same way. And I think after I started reading that, I was like, okay, I get it. I got to be more present.
Man, okay. Yeah. I'm not convinced totally yet, but I'm definitely thinking about it. I'm giving it thought. Let's put it that way. And I think just to wrap this up, because we could talk this out for days.
We could go in a whole other direction with this one. Yep.
Yeah. I think just one other, when I was thinking about all of our guests and preparing for this podcast episode, I was thinking, what are the differences? What are the likes between all of our guests and what are the differences? And I think we've talked about community somewhat, but I think each of them brought up a person or people that have been support for them or collaborators. They've all had significant support system and attributed their work and happiness and success to a community or other people. And I think that's so important to point out because no one's doing anything in a vacuum. They just aren't. I mean, someone maybe, but that's gotta suck. So I think it was really interesting that every single person really said like, hey, I collaborated with so-and-so, or my husband is a partner for me and has really pushed me in my entrepreneurial journey. That was a big takeaway for me.
Me too. I mean, I couldn't do anything without my husband, and we don't even work together. So I love to talk to the women who they get to partner with their spouse. I'm sure it has its ups and downs now that I think about it.
Oh, for sure. But I've worked with Michael in the past. Yeah, that's it. That's our quarter. That's our wrap up. We had some fabulous guests. Thanks to all of them. Thanks to you for listening. Thanks to Monogram for believing in us and sponsoring DesignDash Podcast and DesignDash in general. And thanks to you, Melissa, for being amazing always. And putting up with speaking of partners and support, like putting up with my crazy antics.
Well, we couldn't do this without each other. We couldn't.
That's so true. All right. And if you enjoyed this podcast, please give us a listen and a follow and sign up for notifications for future episodes. Thanks so much.
Thanks, everybody. Thank you for listening. Make sure to check out our next podcast coming live next week on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts. In the meantime, you can find us and more wonderful stories like these on DesignDash.com. And make sure to follow us at DesignDasher on Instagram and TikTok. Till next time.